hear me okay? Everybody? Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for having us here. I'm Mary Margaret, as just introduced, and we're really excited to share a topic that's really on our mind. We have a lot of internal discussions about it, and it just so happened that there was this great article in the New York Times, and we were like, hey, this is the kind of stuff that we're always talking about and always thinking about. So we're really appreciative to have the opportunity to talk with you all about it today. I guess we can just dive in. I have to give complete credit to Melanie. Melanie put together the presentation. So we are here to support Melanie's great work. So we'll just kind of go through the slides. We want to keep it really interactive. We want to hear what you all think. This is something, there are no right answers, there are no wrong answers on this. And I think that this is something that, while we're looking at it in the context of from an arts lens, because we represent arts and culture here in Miami-Dade County as part of the county. But we're very interested in kind of hearing what you all think, because while we're looking at it through that lens, it's bigger than that, right? So we will get to it, but I think we're going to tell you a little bit about culture shock first.
Thank you, Mary Margaret. Again, good morning. My name is Christina Tassi-Beauvoir, and I'm one of the co-managers of Culture Shock Miami. So you may wonder, well, what in the world is Culture Shock Miami? Culture Shock is an audience development program that the Department of Cultural Affairs created just to get teens and young adults between the ages of 13 to 22 interested in attending more arts events. So a few years back, we were approached by the Knight Foundation, who wanted us to replicate this program down here because it does take place in New York already, and they thought our department was well placed to replicate the program only because we have an existing relationship with a lot of cultural organizations in Miami-Dade County. As the Department of Cultural Affairs, our main mission is to fund local arts organizations. So we basically give them money. We're one of their biggest government supporters in the Miami-Dade County area. So again, the Knight Foundation approached us and said, here's this wonderful program happening in New York. They're making the arts available to students for only $5. We think it would be great if you could implement that program down here in Miami. So we did, or we went along with their suggestion, and the first thing we did was talk to students. So we went out to a few schools, gathered a few college students, just to get a better understanding of what their interests are, but also why they're not looking for more arts activities or to take part in more arts activities. And most of the feedback we had from them, or from teens or young adults such as yourselves, were three challenges. One, the arts are not marketed to that age range, meaning organizations who do have marketing dollars are going after the people who they know are already coming. They're not looking for new audiences, and definitely not younger audiences. Two, the arts can be a little pricey, right? Tickets to arts activities can range anywhere from $25 to way over $100. So if you're a student, a teen or a young adult, you're not going to drop $150, maybe for Drake or Beyonce, but you're not going to drop $150 for an arts event, a ballet, the opera, and things like that. And the third problem was transportation. Obviously, if you're a young teen, if you're 13, you're not even driving yet. So if you do live, let's say, in Kendall, how do you get to the Arts Center? Even if we were to make a $5 ticket available to you, what is it going to take for you to get on a bus, get on a train at 8 p.m. at night? Is it really going to happen? Is it a reality? No, not really. So knowing the transportation challenges that our community has, we figured we would tackle that as well. So that's how we were able to introduce Culture Shock Miami. It's a website providing a centralized database, basically, marketing the arts to students. So that answers their first challenge of not knowing what's happening and nobody marketing to them. The second one, making it an affordable ticket. So all of our tickets are always $5 for everything on our website. Everything from your basic local community grassroots event to ballet performances, the Nutcracker, the opera, things happening at the Arts Center downtown, to the South Miami-Dade Cultural Arts Center, the Miami-Dade County Auditorium, even museums, so $5 tickets for the zoo, Fairchild, Pam, all those amazing venues, and then enters transportation. So we wondered, how in the world are we going to address that part? So we thought, especially for your younger students, because we know if you're 18 and up, you'll have a friend who drives and things like that. But for the younger students, we thought it would be important to definitely keep them involved by not only being able to purchase a $5 ticket for themselves, but definitely having mom or dad or somebody else who can take you. So we decided to introduce a second $5 ticket also for $5. So that way we're able to address the transportation. Maybe you don't drive yet, but you have a friend who can drive, or somebody who's older than you and who has a car and can drive and can take you somewhere. So then they'll be able to purchase a $5 ticket to attend the performance with you. So that's how the program came about in 2002, 2004. So we've been around for about 15 years now. A lot of people still don't know about the program. A lot of people are continuously turning 13 on a daily basis, so we find that we have to keep educating that audience basically on a daily basis. But in a nutshell, that's what Culture Shock Miami is all about. It's the audience development program of the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs.
Awesome. So just a quick question. Before today, who knew about Culture Shock Miami? Okay, cool. So getting into our topic for today, art sustainability and funding, can they coexist? So this presentation was put together based on an article from the New York Times called Should Oil Fund the Arts? Should oil money fund the arts? And that's the question I have for you today. So right now, as you have not received, let's say, more information about the topic, do you think that all three of these factors can come together just seamlessly? It can be, there's no right or wrong answer. It can just be a yes or no, or I don't know.
What do you mean by seamlessly?
Like, can they fit together perfectly? Like, do you think that there will be no challenges in trying to unite all three of them?
Without challenges, no.
Okay. Awesome. So for this article, there were two things that were made very clear that companies, art performance companies in Europe, would not accept money from. And that was arms companies and companies that had to do with the opioid crisis. However, there's a third sector that's coming in now that art companies are becoming very reluctant to accept money from, and that is the oil and gas industry. And this comes about because of the climate crisis and everything surrounding that, and especially the youth movement that's leading the climate crisis. So just a quick question. How does this differ from the US? Like, do you think that there's really any difference between the companies that they're reluctant to accept versus the companies that we're reluctant to accept?
I guess another way of maybe asking that is, does it make a difference? Is it just European-centric, do you think, or is it kind of more global?
Well, I think that Europe kind of has more of the mindset of being, or having that lifestyle of being sustainable. They've adopted that lifestyle, and I feel like the US is lacking in that area, and we're slowly progressing to get there. And I think it has a lot to do with politics too, right? Oil companies are big people out there who are supporting oil companies because they get so much money from it, so it's hard for us to transition to not supporting oil companies since it's such a big factor in the US. So
Definitely. So that was kind of the main topic of the article. So this quote kind of sums it all up, and it says that the National Portrait Gallery in London cut ties with BP, saying that it's furthering its role in the climate crisis. So basically, it was not only limited to the National Portrait Gallery. After this, many other performance art companies, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, the Royal Opera, all of those places started kind of joining into the fight. But it wasn't necessarily the corporations, like the corporation behind the organization. It was the local artists. All of this movement was driven by the local artists. And it's not that it's new either. It's been around since 2003. That's when the first protest took place, specifically for climate change. And then that's when all of these companies now are starting to get together and really make this a main point in how they drive their organizations. So BP, which was the funder in this particular case, was only investing 3% of its available capital in renewable energy. So would it be different if BP was actively working towards the solutions, or is the problem that they're just an oil company in general?
I mean, I'm a skeptic. So, I mean, 3%, I mean, I want to know what that translates in terms of real numbers. If that's something that's steadily increasing, or they just want to keep it as minimally as possible. So I guess I'm looking more for like a projection. If it's an oil company and they're like, well, we're making the effort, but making the effort means it's going to be 3% all the time, then maybe not, right? That's just my opinion.
Anybody else?
Hi. I mean, not everybody can expect a company to just change how they get their oil overnight. Like, it's not going to increase over a short period of time. So if they are working for the solution actively over the years, and you can really see that increase, that percentage change over the years, then I think it would really make a difference, especially because all the people that they're employing would also have that kind of mentality and could contribute to it. Otherwise, not really.
Anyone else?
I mean, no matter how much, if they are trying to do renewable energy, it's still an oil company, and they're still extracting and fracking and putting toxic chemicals and into our water, into our air, into our soil. Like, those things have an effect on all of us, and just because they might be, having available capital in renewable energy, that doesn't really mean anything, really, because they're still an oil company and they're still fracking oil. So, yeah, they're still bad.
Well, I kind of want to bounce off that. I feel like ever since the Paris Agreement in 2015, America was one of the countries who didn't sign for the Paris Agreement. And I think that goes to show that all these other oil companies in Europe or wherever else, they have goals to be sustainable and reduce their carbon footprint or whatever. And I feel like since America isn't in that agreement, that they're not trying to progress their carbon emissions as oil companies such as in Europe. So that's where I feel like that can go.
Thinking if I were one of these arts organizations, I might want to think about what I could do to change the behavior of these companies, even if that's a impossible or a very difficult goal, versus just denying their money, because this is money that the company is giving to the art organization. So if I turn down that money, that organization has no incentive to do anything differently. If anything, they're saving money. Like, do you take the money and then do a climate-focused art installation or play that's going to raise awareness using that money? And then if BP gets upset that you're doing that and takes the money away anyway, at least you did something about it.
I mean, not to play devil's advocate here, but I'm a firm believer in you judge people the way you want to be judged in a way. So I almost want to know also, is the installation, the art itself, what are they doing to kind of address climate change too, if you're going to be that discerning with who you get funding from?
So that was a great lead into our next slide. And Mark Rylance is a very well-known actor. He's an Academy Award and Tony-winning actor, and he resigned from his position at the Royal Shakespeare Company because he said that they accepted money from BP to subsidize the tickets for the young people. And then the artists were also asking to end the BP sponsorship of outdoor opera and ballet screenings. So this is where we as a program think to ourselves, how would that affect us, right? In our case, it doesn't, because we're funded by the government. But if we were just another arts performing organization, how would it affect us? So is this essentially, if someone's stepping down from their title because they're giving this money, but it is to help the young people, how would you feel about that? Is that something that you think would probably do more harm than good, or are you a firm believer that they're just taking this stance and it's something that they should fight for?
And I think, although the article only gives us the information that we know, but I think we can look at it that he's saying that the program should go away. So pull the money, we shouldn't take the money anymore. So then that eradicates the program for providing cheap tickets to kids. So I guess that's the question, right? So that's something, again, that we were really wrestling with this. So really interested in what you guys think.
So, focusing on the climate change issue, the guns and the opioid crisis might have a different calculus. Is BP the sole, or these types of companies, the sole organization to focus on? The United States government, the administration, is what pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Should you maybe not take any National Endowment for the Arts or any other federal funding as a protest at this point if you're going to go down this road?
I think it also goes back to your question that you asked at the beginning of it being seamless. Like, it's not going to be without its challenges. If you give up the money, you can't have everything you want, right? So you either give up the money and lose the programs, or you keep the programs and then you have to take the money. And I think, ideally we would want to not take the money from BP, but then still keep the programs. But if that's not a possibility, how else are you going to get that funding?
Definitely. And I think also in this case, so he's a very well-known actor. And if we look at so much of like celebrity status and how people follow through with someone based on their celebrity status, do you think if you were this person's fan, would you say, wow, I totally agree with this, like I'm going to support this 100% just because of what this person is saying? Or would it actually make you not like the person as much?
So I came in a little late, but in regards to that question, I know there was a big thing going on with Taylor Swift where she was encouraging her followers to vote and do this and that. And the same thing happened with Katy Perry where she was encouraging people to vote for Hillary Clinton. But at the end of the day, even with the large following that they have, Hillary Clinton didn't end up winning. And a lot of people were saying how they know Taylor Swift, who she was voting for, who she wanted to win. In her state, she ended up losing the people that she wanted to vote. So I think right now we're in a time where people will do whatever they want, regardless of who's telling them what to do, especially with what's going on right now.
I actually disagree with that because, unfortunately, we all are sheep of society and we all kind of like follow what everyone else does. And I think influencers play a big part, especially with social media platforms, on kind of influencing people's decisions on things to do. So, having people like, Tony Award winning actors and famous people kind of advocating for, what their opinions are and what their beliefs are. I feel like that definitely has a big impact on not only the fan base, but just the influx of news of just, people having their opinions get out there and having those people be a voice for change or for whatever they're believing in. And I'm also interested in what, because oil companies are usually more on the conservative side. So that's interesting that they would be funding art programs. Yeah, that's just a comment.
There are quite, sorry, I have to remember, I'm terrible about it. There are a lot of big Fortune 500 companies that have separate foundations or, have a separate arm in which it's philanthropic in nature. They're funding a lot of programs that may typically be similar. It may be run similarly to a nonprofit. where they're actually putting stuff out into the community. And so I don't have all the details of what BP's structure actually is, but I do believe that that is some arm of this where they're actually funding specific initiatives. And we do see that, with a lot of big corporations, that they are actually putting money into these types of things. And I will tell you from, as we're running a program that's targeted specifically for teenagers and college kids, when we talk to folks out there, they want to do things that help students. Like, they are all about it. And so that's something that, I think is a way to get inside some of these big behemoth corporations, because they want to do good. They want to contribute and be part of the community. And the student, that's something that really resonates with folks, because they really like to help students out. So, any case, where are we on here? Still in. Does anybody know who Mark Rylance is? Anybody heard of him? He was in a movie. I think it's Men of Spies with Tom Hanks a couple of years ago. That was pretty big. He was in the BFG. He was the voice of the BFG. If anybody saw that movie. Yeah, he saw it. So he's super famous, kind of really more so in the theatrical world. And one of the things that I think is so interesting, about this is that if we didn't have access to information like we do now currently through social media and whatnot, would we have even ever heard of this? That Mark Rylance, cared enough to say that, nope, this goes against my personal values. And so I'm willing to relinquish my position with this very esteemed company that has employed him for many, 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 many years. And he's been involved in it for a very long time. So would we even care? Would we even hear about it and even care, then if we didn't have such access? And I think that kind of really dovetails on what Melanie was saying. Because we have such access to folks, when we see what influencers are saying, what Taylor Swift says, what Katy Perry is telling folks to do, would we care if we didn't have such access to them? I think that's a question, or something to think about at least.
And I think it's also important to know, he's saying to pull out of these programs, but is it going to affect him? Not at all. He's a world famous actor. He probably has the money to pay for full performances. So how does it impact us directly as the students? It's very, I guess, I don't want to say easy, but it can be easy for him to say, I'm a firm believer in this and I'm going to support this no matter what, when it doesn't really affect him personally. So that's something else to think about.
There's so many sides, of how to look at it.
I wanted to comment on that. And that happens with everything, right? Social services, nonprofits. If you trace all monies, at one point, there might be a tie to a company that is morally against your beliefs. So it will be really hard. We live in a globalized world. It will be really hard to find clean money or something that will always align. Now, my question will be more, will that funding, that company that is giving me funding, they'll try to push an agenda? Will they make me change the narrative? Because that's, I think, sometimes it could be the big question, because the money, again, will be tied.
That's a very good point, because then you start thinking, are there strings attached with that money, right? Am I a conservative? Somebody mentioned them being a conservative organization. Am I a conservative organization giving to an arts organization which is more liberal, so I can get closer to somebody on the liberal side and have my agenda item voted on or things like that? And there could be a tie, but at the same time, we also think back, at least I do, think back to what those funds are contributing to. So that's just something for us to keep in mind, right? And maybe just have that in the back of your head to think about whether or not there is a hidden agenda. Because we do know organizations, they do, I don't want to say trade services, but they do influence, right, decision makers. So that's a very good point.
Which actually brings us into our next point. So where do we personally draw the line? Like, these are companies that we see on a daily basis, we might use on a daily basis, and we hear of everything that they do or a scandal that might have come out with them, but yet people keep going back to them, right? So now just looking at like the US perspective and what we do personally, where do you draw the line with certain companies?
And does it matter?
I mean, speaking from experience, I worked with a nonprofit called Superhero Leadership Academy, and we pretty much help a lot of low-income kids. So one of them came up to me because I'm trying to be not necessarily vegetarian or vegan, but I'm trying to reduce my carbon footprint. So I'm eating more things that are vegan and vegetarian. So I was speaking to her about it, and she just told me, like, I went to the supermarket, and she has like a kid that she has to take care of. She's 15. And it's really hard for her, so she went to the supermarket and she couldn't afford a lot of things that would be healthier for her. And I didn't even know what to tell her, like, because all of those things are like higher priced because it's harder to get, especially things that are organic and so on. So a lot of this comes with like, what is your background and your income level. So you don't really have a choice whether you do it or not, because otherwise you can't eat or you can't go to places or have clothing. So it's really hard to target where you can stop or not. So, yeah.
I think this really all goes towards your lifestyle as well and what your morals are. But I think it does matter whether you buy from farmer's market or go to Publix. I mean, I would much rather spend my money on a local mom and pop farmer's market than go to Publix, because I know that they obviously didn't have such a big ecological footprint that went into transporting and, you know, all of the everything that goes into that. And also goes with clothes. I mean, I personally try to avoid buying online too, because the packaging and also the transportation and everything that goes into that, and trying to buy more secondhand clothes. I think that can go with it as well, and that's more of a lifestyle change that I think people can adapt to. It's just hard because we live in such a consumerism world. You know, America is very capitalistic, where all these other businesses are rising up, and that's just kind of how we run, which is sad. I think we could lean towards more of a less ecological footprint if we didn't support these big companies. Yeah.
I feel like this all goes under the foundation of education and knowledge-based information as far as like what is, you know, the right choice. I feel like it's really hard to make the right choice nowadays just because, you know, our lives are so complex and like it was said earlier, you know, there's all these under the table kind of like, you know, this company feeds into that company, and that might go against your moral beliefs. But I feel like there is really a lack of, especially in the US, just communication between, you know, the government and these companies with the population. And you know, these companies, you know, with the market, they're just trying to maximize their profits. So, you know, even if you want to buy necessarily green products, there's so much greenwashing nowadays and things that prohibit people from really like getting to, like, for cleaning products, you don't have to put the ingredients on the actual product. Like, you don't even know what's in your house that you're using that are toxic to you, you know, in your water, in your ground, like, you know, just burning trash that creates like one of the most toxic chemicals, dioxin, like that's in our air, that's everywhere. And I just feel like it's hard for people to get actual credible information on these companies and on these resources that we use every day.
I'd like to touch about like the Nike situation where they were accused of having the child labor out in Asia, and so you're talking about drawing the line, and I was thinking about like many companies are out there doing the same thing, and most people don't know about the situation, the life those kids are living out there. Those kids don't have access to good schools, don't have access to like basic basic requirements for life, like food, water, and shelter. So they probably need those jobs, and you can't tell them that no, you can't work, but because they can't go to school either. I think that was kind of a point.
I think where I would draw the line, I guess, personally, and I guess for the organization, the museums, is just do as much as you can. Like, it's kind of impossible to trace back every dollar to make sure it's sustainable, or if you're in a difficult situation, like, you know, you're 15 and you have to raise your kid, like, and you can't afford to go to the farmer's market, don't do that, but do something else instead. And then the question changes to, does it matter where the money comes from or what you do with it? Yeah, BP, you know, they are polluting, but if you're using it, I think somebody said it before, to host exhibits about sustainability, then that kind of breaks the cycle in a way. So I think you have to see that there's different options. And it's impossible to solve everything all at once, especially if you don't have the resources. You kind of have to do your best to do what you can with what you have available.
And to that point, and to yours also, I think it's understanding that different people have different realities, right? If you're 15, you're trying to raise a child, you're not gonna think even about going to, you probably can't even get to a farmer's market. You're going to your local Publix, Winn-Dixie, Fresco Imas, whatever, to just get the bare necessities and bring it back home. So maybe it's part of it is also acknowledging that different people have different realities, and not necessarily shaming them for what they're doing, but maybe trying to educate them so they know that there's another option if ever they're able to make that choice or have that choice be available to them. And again, not shaming them, but just looking to educate and being more sensible towards other people.
I think Christina's point's excellent, and the points that all of you made. I mean, it's so big, right? I mean, we really have to look at these things through a very wide angle lens. And, you know, you made an excellent point, you know, so if we are patronizing an organization that has questionable practices, you know, maybe in another part of the world, and so that goes away, then what happens to all those people that rely on that income? Mm-hmm. So that's like, well, that's even bigger. I mean, that's zooming out even more. So I think it's really important, you know, that we do that. And I think that, you know, I think everybody kind of looks at it from what's important to them. You know, we have a couple of logos up here. I'm pointing up here. You guys can't see that. We have a couple of logos here that, you know, as Melanie said, these are some companies that have been in the news lately for some things that have really kind of made people pause, right? That have like, I don't know, that's gonna make me think twice about going to Chick-fil-A or shopping at Publix or, you know, Uber, you know. We've become so reliant on you and all of your fellow rideshare services, you know. But so, you know, where do you draw the line? And I think that's just something really good if we just continue to question that and to have these discussions and share that information. I think it's really important.
I think all of this extra information, I don't want to say extra, but all of this information just helps us become maybe better global citizens, right? Because we're not so focused on ourselves and just how it's impacting me, but as you mentioned, how it's impacting a world that's thousands of miles away. And I think that's what social media and all this extra communication is doing now. It's just making us global citizens as opposed to just a U.S. citizen or citizen of a particular country. It's opening your eyes and helping you zoom out a little bit more and take consideration into somebody else's needs or somebody else's, just their lives in general.
So shifting over back to BP, these are just some quick stats that, disclaimer, are from their self-reporting. So if you want to take that.
So we looked a little bit further into this, and so BP is one of the largest funders of 4 main arts organizations in England: the Portrait Gallery, the National Portrait Gallery, Royal Shakespeare Company, Royal Opera. I'm forgetting something else, something really big. Ballet. Thank you. How could I forget the ballet? But in any case, so. We looked at this, and for the Royal Shakespeare Company alone, you know, they're responsible for over 62,000 tickets that have been provided through that program that specifically funded that Mark Rylance has said, you know, bye, I'm no longer participating because you're participating with Royal Shakespeare Company for that in that capacity. I'm sure Mark Rylance, and all full disclosure, I'm sure Mark Rylance has no problem with students getting £5 tickets. Like, I'm sure. Well, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. But in any case, that's what he's saying. And so just in the sense of the greater impact of what BP, has been able to provide with their money, over 50 million people have benefited somehow from their investment in arts and culture. And so that is huge. That's gigantic. That's major impact. And that's folks that, we're again looking at this through an arts and culture lens, and that's what we live and breathe and die for in our jobs. And so when we look at impact like that, and that's like, that's what you hope to achieve, so looking at it coming from a different perspective and from those arts organizations, you're like, okay, well, if we are going to take a hard line on this and not accept this money, then how are we going to supplement that? How are we going to continue these programs? Because once you have programs out there that are very successful like this, then they go away, then what happens to the folks that are benefiting from that, right? And again, to zoom out, we see this in a lot of different programs, government programs and whatnot, when those are being called into question. When they go away, what happens?
And just to put this statistics into perspective for you and how it relates directly to Culture Shock Miami, so they have a £5 ticket, we have a $5 ticket. They target 16 to 25, we target 13 to 22. They've, sold over 62,000 tickets. We've processed over 120,000 tickets. So this is exactly related to what we do on a daily basis. And I cannot tell you how many times I've walked into a theater and we've hosted a free field trip, and I've seen a young child walk in, and I love that, and I get chills every time I tell this story, because the minute they walk in, you can tell that they've never been in that space, because their eyes automatically just, it's like they take it all in just one full swoop with their eyelids, and you just know that you've captured them. This is that one moment that you need to convert them into an arts enthusiast and arts patron, and my statistics are directly in correlation to this information, and I'm wondering, well, without funding like that, would we be able to do what we do on an annual basis? So it's tough. As a citizen, you're probably against it, or I know I am. But then as an arts administrator, really knowing and actually seeing, I can taste the impact that these funds have. It's so palpable, and it makes you pause. It makes you wonder.
And then this is just an open question. So if you were in this position, if you were forced to choose between either taking the funding or eliminating all of the funding from that company, what would you do if you were that director? Do you think your personal beliefs would play into this? Because now you're looking at it from just a company perspective.
I'm not answering this question directly, but I kind of just want to bounce off what you said a little earlier, how you said a lot of sponsors are really excited to fund money to students. So even if we didn't get, or if this company didn't want money from BP, I'm sure there was so many other sponsors who would love to support student affiliations where they can only get $5 tickets.
That's a great point.
I would say, like he said, take the money and do something good with it. Like, yeah, the company isn't doing the best, but you could still make something good out of that money. But it's just my personal belief that politics and entertainment should be very far away from each other, because it'll lead to what I refer to as creative suicide.
Want to quickly disagree with you, even though you agreed with me earlier in terms of art and politics being far apart, because the best art is very political, I think, but depends on the situation and type of art, perhaps. Perhaps it's different about what the content of the art is about versus what the artists are doing outside of that and things like that. But in general, those are things that I think can and often should go together.
And that's an interesting conversation that you two are having, because that's something we live on a daily basis. Also, being part of a government agency, organizing or presenting arts activities or being so involved in the not-for-profit arts world, we cannot advocate we can advocate in favor of the arts, but we cannot make it a political process because we do get funded through the government. So if the government takes a stance, in our case it's Miami-Dade County, we can't say anything against what Miami-Dade County is doing, even though it may not benefit a particular arts organization. So this brings a story to mind. Way back when we had something called a Miami-Dade County affidavit. So when the county gives you money, the organization has to complete an affidavit saying that it will not do certain things or it will not employ certain people. So it's not involved in drugs, it's not involved in criminal activities, this is the organization. And at the time, we had something called a Cuba affidavit. So every organization had to sign this saying we're not going to do business with Cuba because the federal government and the county are not doing work with Cuba either. Well, one of those arts organizations actually took on the county and it went to court and they sued the county because they wanted to work with artists directly in Cuba, and they said this has no political stance. It has nothing to do with the Castro regime or the regime in place. We just want to work directly with these artists. And actually, they took the county to court, and they won. And the ruling was that the county had to strike out the Cuba language completely out of their affidavit, and that language was removed. So it could be that the arts become political, right? And actually, in this case, it has a positive outcome for the artists. So just something more for you guys to keep in mind.
So this was basically the statement that the Royal Opera House executive issued, and they said that while they do prioritize the environmental obligations, they have to balance that with the access for the arts. So basically what we've been discussing this whole time, like, where do you draw the line, right? So for them, it was they definitely wanted to keep their program because it was benefiting so many people, but they still wanted to, in that statement, say we're still prioritizing the environmental issues. So that was their stance on that. And one quote that specifically stood out to us from this article is, if you remove companies from the equation, you're going to rely heavily on government, and I don't see much spare cash washing around. And so for us, we're government funded, so that's very different. That's a very different perspective coming from us. And that comes with its own set of challenges. So Culture Shock Miami is one of 4 major discount ticket programs for youth. And something to keep in mind is that most of them are nonprofit organizations. They're not government funded like we are. So there's definitely lots of different challenges that come with that.
So just to think back how Culture Shock started, right? It was a grant from a foundation. The Knight Foundation gave us $125,000 to start up the program. So replace Knight Foundation with BP, no Culture Shock Miami. Now we're looking to grow the program. We currently target students between the ages of 13 to 22. We're looking to maybe expand the program, and we're working with local cultural organizations to do so. And what are we doing to do that? We can't go back to the government or to our government to say, you're already giving us money, we need you to give us more money. Because guess what they're telling us? No, we need to give money to fire, we need to give money to police, we need to give money to housing. There are so many other needs that our community has, that our county has, that they can't give money to the arts. So now we need to go back out to another funder, another large corporation organization, and see how we're able to get our hands on additional funds to help grow the program. So just to let you know, our Department of Cultural Affairs, our annual budget currently is between $22 to $25 million a year. And that's just Miami-Dade County. Now pull back and think about the state of Florida. The stats are up there already? Yeah. So the state of Florida, their Department of Cultural Affairs funds the entire state at just $2.65 million. That's the state of Florida versus $25 million that the county has for their Department of Cultural Affairs. That's for the current year. For current year, yes, current year. The state is looking to increase from 2.6 million to 21 million next year. And all this to say that it really depends who the administration is at the time, and that will dictate basically the amount of funds that an organization or a state-funded agency, I should say, receives. So does anybody know how the county gets their funds? How the county government gets money. We don't just wake up and find money in a big pot. Nobody knows? Very good, very good. Property taxes. So the large fund, or the large portion of funds that Miami-Dade County has comes from property taxes. In addition to property taxes, we also have tourist tax. There's a 2% bed and beverage tax, I believe. So for every tourist that comes to Miami-Dade County, they're charged an extra bit of, when they stay in our hotels, they're charged an extra tourist tax, which also contributes to the county's pool of revenue.
It depends on the economy.
And tying that back to the environment, so because we're funded that way, and our department is funded through that a lot. That's the significant part of our funding through the bed tax. So when we have things like Zika, and when we have things like hurricanes, and folks do not come to Miami, then that directly impacts the revenue stream. And so that directly impacts the next year's budget. So tying it back to the environment, are we there? Did I jump the slide?
It's all good.
Okay. I have a habit of doing that, sorry.
So yeah, the only other thing was that obviously it informs our programming. So one example I can think of is we presented this show called Turning 15 on the Road to Freedom, and it's about the story of one of the youngest members of the civil rights movement. So it was during the midterm election season, and at our show we had members of voting, the elections department come to register people to vote. However, it's not like other events where we can tell people to specifically vote for one candidate or advocate for one candidate. It was just letting them know that they had the option to register to vote there. So it really depends, because our programming, like in the art, has to be as nonpartisan as possible, and that's really hard.
Here we are, friends. Here we are. So going back to that question, what can we do, right? So one of the things that Miami-Dade County, and then our department specifically, the Department of Cultural Affairs, has recently launched a program called Arts Resilience 305. So this is a new initiative. It is part of the Miami-Dade County Mayor, Carlos Jimenez's greater initiative of Resilient 305. And so this, as I mentioned, it's new, and it's going to be something that we're rolling out over the next several months and even in years, but it's all about, we're trying to look at this from how can we as artists, or the artistic community, the cultural community, address climate change. It is a real threat right here in our own community. So the Cultural Affairs Council chair, Xavier Cortada, who some of you may know, he's a very well-known local artist and internationally known artist. He's the chair. And then with our director of our department, Michael Spring, they have really put their belief and their influence into getting this off the ground. So we are very much taking this seriously. We believe that we have to do something now. We have to act now. And so this is something that you all will hopefully be able to see some programs and things that are rolling out from the artistic community. So keep an eye on that.
Yeah, so our final question is, how do you think that government can work towards making sustainable changes, or how can companies or individuals really work towards making sustainable changes? Whether that's in the arts community or elsewhere.
I think one way we could really make a change is with policy changes. If we enacted policies that would make us more sustainable, such as really enforcing recycling, which is a micro scale thing to do, it can make a difference, or even just making policy changes for the way business is run. I think that could be a big change for sustainability and climate change, because these companies, we really do have such a big impact. And then as individuals as well, we have a big impact. But I think if policies were to change a little, or go in more the direction of sustainability, I think that could make a big change.
Also, going off on what you said on policy, also foreign policy would be a big change, since if you have that standard within your country already, other foreign countries might take example, because they can't come into your economy or have your consumers if they don't have that kind of ecological standard of sustainability. So that would be the first step, I think, because then you're an example for the rest of the other countries.
Yeah, I think definitely agree with both of them that policy is very important, but I think on a smaller scale, something that we can do every day is going back to kind of seeing what choices you have. So, okay, you can't go to the farmer's market, but you can recycle, or you can try to buy secondhand clothes, or even if it's small things, they don't have as big of an impact as policy change, but at least you're trying to do what you can, because the problem of climate change is on all of us, like all of our actions. We can't just hold big companies and governments responsible. Like, we also have to do our part, and whatever that looks like to you.
All right, well, that was our presentation for today. So thank you all so much for being here. And yes, we brought a bunch of little giveaways. There's really cute like Post-it notebooks, so if you haven't gotten them yet, feel free to get them as you walk out. And there's also an option to sign up for our weekly newsletter out there, so you can get all of the different $5 events or free events that are going on in our community as well. So, oh yes, and we have a spoken word performance coming up next Saturday, which a lot of his work actually focuses on environmental causes and things of that nature. So if you're interested in anything like that, you can see us, and we have the flyers up there as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.